Win big in 2023 with Teams Sync from RotoBaller. Import your fantasy teams and sync your leagues. Get customized tools and tailored advice for your specific rosters and scoring settings, including live recommendations from the Live Draft Assistant, Free Agent Finder, and Lineup Optimizer. Sync an unlimited amount of NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL fantasy teams from all of the major platforms. Get a discount for any premium pass using my promo code Knuckler, K-N-U-C-K-L-E-R, like R.A. Dickey. And shout out to Tim Wakefield. Just visit rotoballer.com/radio and start rotoballing like a boss. And what's up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you another interlude episode of RotoBaller's official MMA podcast. Tap that. We've got a UFC hiatus this week. Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. That's where I make picks for all the major regional promotions and prospect feeders. RIZIN, Bellator, PFL, big boxing matches. That's where I make picks for it. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and the Facebook page. And with me today, a very special episode. I can't wait to get into talking about this promotion. I love the product, and I love the unique cultural aspect that there is with any organization coming out of Japan. With me, Jay, Christian, Gary, and Andrew of the We Are RIZIN podcast. Guys, how's it going today?
Well, first of all I got to say is, what's good, y'all? We are happy to be a part of the RotoBaller podcast and Tap That, of course. And we are happy that we have been invited to be a part of it. I can't really say the same for Andrew, but I did not think that when Andrew started and I joined in 2018 for this podcast, We Are RIZIN podcast, I did not think that we would be, even invited on this big of a platform such as yourself. What about you, Andrew?
Oh yeah, no, I'm happy to be here. I'm very happy to be here. It only feels good to be invited rather than invited, be on a podcast or a show or whatever. It feels humbling when it happens.
Oh, and I agree. It's always a fun thing to be asked to be on someone else's show as opposed to, the other way around. But guys, so first off, we're going to talk about RIZIN today. So here, just from last week, man, were you disappointed, not surprised, whatever your reaction was? Tsuyoshi Sudario and Todd Duffy, that was on the card. It didn't happen because of Todd Duffy's passport issues. Todd Duffy got knocked out by Mike Russo on the first UFC pay-per-view I watched in full at UFC 114. What do you think about the talent or the, just the intrigue of a dude with the background of Tsuyoshi Sudario? And what do you think would have happened had he fought Todd Duffy?
Andrew, you want to take that?
Yeah, it's so funny you bring up that Mike Russo one because I remember that one as well. Because I remember I saw that at Applebee's when they used to show UFCs at Applebee's way back. And I remember just a little bit of tangent. I just remember that Todd Duffy. I remember when he was considered a prospect, and I was like astounded that he got invited to a RIZIN card. Anyway, in answer to your question, I mean, man, can't deny that Todd Duffy would have had a puncher's chance, but man, that chin must be vaporized by now. Not to say that he couldn't have knocked out Sudario. It's just I don't think Duffy 10 years ago, yes. Todd Duffy now, less likely. I think he would have wound up being knocked out in the first round.
Todd Duffy. Go ahead.
Oh, my apologies, Roto. And in my opinion, I think that when people remember Todd Duffy, they remember when he got KO'd by Alistair Overeem back on New Year's Eve 2010, more so than any of his UFC fights, more so than the two-fight rivalry he had with Phil DeFries, which he just wrapped up with an L in KSW. I mean, they probably remember him more for his losses than his wins and for the considerable time off that he's had, more so than the time he's had in the cage or in the ring. But to be honest, Todd Duffy should have gotten that stuff taken care of when it came down to the visa issues. I mean, he probably should have been in Japan like 2 weeks before the fight just to get all that situated. But still don't. There's no excuse for Todd Duffy, especially a veteran of that nature, to even not think about implications such as that.
That was my first reaction is like, dude, how do you not have your passport thing? If you're, it's like when Fab Melo like failed like a sociology class back like 10 years ago and couldn't play in the tournament for Syracuse. It's like, isn't there someone in charge of this? It's just wild. And you're right, Todd Duffy does get remembered more for the negatives. So he's kind of become like, sort of a caricature in MMA folklore. And, kind of like every 10 or 8 years, kind of like rises from the shadows and fights in some fun like Japanese promotion, or the the loss of Phil DeFries. But so that kind of takes us to, obviously Japan has a very long and storied history of mixed martial arts, a very unique flavor of it in terms of the audiences, the showmanship, the kind of talent that they produce, and the very origins of what we know as the sport of MMA now, come from some of these organizations that started in Japan. And so for right now, where, we're seeing the PFL and Bellator, with that situation playing out, and, the UFC leaking a little bit more into the Asian market with Road to UFC, what do you think is the state of major mixed martial arts promotions in Japan and in Asia as a whole right now?
I mean, I think when it comes down to the state of MMA, and just to clarify what you meant on the Fab Melo situation, may he rest in peace, I do remember that particular situation really well when it came down to Fab Melo not playing in the NCAA tournament, because I am a basketball fan. But still, though, when it comes down to the pride, the pageantry, the prestige of Japanese MMA compared to what it is now, I think that, Japan is still hurting from the loss of Pride FC back in 2007. But I think that RIZIN over the last 8 years has managed to not only fill the void, but also, exceed in trying to make it even more exciting than what Pride was, especially when it comes down to bringing in guys like a Floyd Mayweather to help boost up the excitement for Pride, to help boost up the excitement for RIZIN, or help bring in all these possible matchups with all these future stars. I mean, especially considering the fact the amount of future stars that were built from RIZIN, like a Jiri Prohaska or like a Tofik Musayev, so to speak. Andrew, what say you?
I'm just gonna say, so I think that, I think a few years ago when Pride, I shouldn't say a few years ago, feels like a few years ago, but it wasn't, when Pride went, obviously what took over after that was Dream, and then you would have the Dynamite shows of K1 and all that stuff. But there definitely was a desert when it came to MMA, a audience interest that was interested in MMA. It's funny now that RIZIN now probably, we have a Discord where we get into all types of discussion. Well, actually, it's so funny that one of the Discord discussions that we're getting in, like, presently at the time this recording is why RIZIN has seemingly lost international recognition, but nonetheless they've actually gone up in terms of domestic success. And and they've managed to cultivate right now people that aren't necessarily the best MMA fighters to get people to come to their shows, but they've made personalities. They've been able to market their fighters with their personalities. Probably the number one fighter right now is a guy named Mikuru Asakura, who is very well known, not only in MMA circles, but also outside, thanks to a show he does called Breaking Down, which is basically like, it's a very crappy underground fight club thing where they basically get Yakuza, they get people that are not professional fighters, and they fight each other in one round. And it either ends in knockout, submission, or decision. And
I mean, you can basically say, and I hate to interrupt, even though it's kind of my thing, but you can basically say it's like the combat sports version of a show called Pros versus Joes.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, not even pros. They only some people are not even close to pros. Anyway, I'll try to quickly finish my point. RIZIN now is probably it's probably the best thing that's happened to MMA in terms of just international thing. Like Chris said, Jiri Prohaska, Manel Cape, Kai Kara France, and even Japanese fighters that they've had on like Makoto Shinryu that have
or Kanako Murata.
Oh yeah, Kanaka and Murata have gone over to UFC and have shown that they can be successful there. And in terms of UFC expanding to the Asian market, see, it's funny that we had Chatri come out and say that one is going to. It basically, he sounded like he was going to that one could usurp K1 and Rise in Japan. It is. I can't speak for the other countries. UFC has been successful in China with Wei Li Zhang, but never has UFC. Whenever UFC has done shows in Japan, they have not drawn. I can tell you for a fact that they have not drawn successfully as you expect a UFC show would. I've heard that a lot of times they've had to pay for tickets, they've had to give away tickets, and there's a reason why they haven't run a show there. And I think they're going to try again because they have people like Rei Tsuruya, Tetsuru Taira, Rinya Nakamura, and I think they're going to try to make that leap again. And I think they're hoping that with these fighters that they've got from Japan, that it can be successful this time. Sorry, that's such a long-winded answer to your question. I hope I answered it as best I could.
No, and I was even I saw your tweet today about that point. And so I was gonna ask you about that eventually anyway. And you know, there's always in the Asian markets, there's always the prides and the dreams. There's always the Sengokus and the Shudos, that occupy multiple tiers of MMA competition. And sometimes for comparison's sake, it can be really hard to do. And you kind of see that with Bellator versus RIZIN. I love that that's something that they can do. It's a very uniquely Scott Coker flavor that, we saw back in the Strikeforce days, greater flexibility for fighters to go and, fight in different parts of the world. And so, and Bellator can be the worst too. Like their PR department is just like non-existent. It's like their goal is to put on an event without a single person who's a dedicated MMA fan, like knowing about it. But Bellator versus RIZIN, that is, those are two events where, a lot of RIZIN fighters took their lumps in those fights. But like, what do you think, like, the effect of something like that is? Because it was great for, a comparison, a competition. And you see guys like Kyoji Horiguchi who were, had been in both organizations in different times. And now you got Juan Archuleta over here, as a champion in RIZIN. So what was your kind of take in the aftermath of the Bellator RIZIN events?
I just want to make a quick joke. Sorry.
You know what? Go ahead, Andrew. I want to hear this quick joke.
I just want to quickly say, you said about Todd Duffy that he comes out every like few years, whatever. It's kind of like the creeper from Jeepers Creepers. He comes out every few years to eat. Maybe that's maybe Todd Duffy is the creeper from Jeepers Creepers, but of MMA. But I'm sorry, Chris. You want to go ahead and answer first? No, I'll go ahead.
I think I can go ahead and answer when it comes down to this because I actually recorded Juan Archuleta's appearance on a big time talk show. I think it was live with Kelly and Mark or whatever, when he was talking about the RIZIN fight that he was going to have at Super RIZIN, which was originally supposed to be against Kai Asakura, but instead ended up being against Hiromasa Kubo. I think that when it comes down to the RIZIN Bellator partnership, I really wouldn't say it's good considering the fact that Bellator does not promote their shows well. And when they do promote their shows well, it's up to the last minute. But when it came down to this particular show, outside of regular media sources, outside of regular fight sources, the only one that was really putting this over was us, really, myself and Andrew Benjamin on our respective platforms. Him on MMA Sucker, my platform on Focus Fights. But still, though, when it came down to Bellator and RIZIN so far, I think it's pretty much good for the diehards. It's good for the fight fans to know that there's like a different way that people can enjoy MMA without having to deal with the same three letters almost every weekend. But when it came down to, the actual logistics of the Bellator RIZIN thing, I mean, Andrew, would you basically say that it has probably underwhelmed, so to speak, or overwhelmed?
Well, it's so funny that well, like Mr. Brady said, I do love the concept. I think it's great to see. It makes for interesting matchups that would never otherwise happen, because we know that
Mm-hmm.
UFC doesn't do it. Doesn't do it. It's great, and I know that the previous RIZIN show of Bellator RIZIN shows that they took RIZIN went 0-5 and Bellator went 5-0. But if you just look at who the people were, it was AJ McKee, Kyoji, Gadzi Rabanov. Trying to forget the other names that were on that card. Juan Archuleta as well, and who was the other one? I'm forgetting who was the other
Patricio
one.
Pitbull.
Oh, Pitbull, yeah. You just look at those guys. I mean, those guys are all world class. It doesn't. I don't think it's a detriment that it says anything that the people in RIZIN aren't world class. I mean, don't forget, Horiguchi's beaten Oyikubo every time that they fought. The Archuleta Social Kim fight was a very close one, and you could make an argument that Kim should have won. I think maybe if Gazi Rabanov, if he didn't knock down Takeda during the fight, you could have made an argument that maybe Takeda could have won. And depending on how you judge a fight, Satoshi could have won in your eyes. But I think that I know that a lot of people didn't like, and the Patricio Kleber fight was solely one sided. So I'm not going to try to say like, oh, Kleber was even close, came close to even winning that fight, because he was nowhere near close. But I think it does show that there is as somebody who has trained in Japan, there definitely is a difference in the training that goes on there versus the training that goes on here, where it's the ones that are successful, like the Shinryus and Horiguchis, Muratas. They've either gone overseas or they receive some sort of specialized training, which is a very rare thing in Japan. For the most part, even if you're a professional MMA fighter who's a champion, Pancrase, Shuto, one, you may not usually train with everybody else on training day. And that's I think that could be the one factor, is that we're seeing who are the people that are being successful and the ones that are being not, the ones that are taking that training to an extra level that a lot of professional fighters in Japan are not doing. Again, I hope that answers both of your questions, because I know you also asked me questions, Chris.
Understood.
Was that answer your question, Mr. Brady?
Yeah.
Maybe.
For sure. And and I think it speaks volumes that in the Bellator RIZIN event, at least every fight went the distance. And as you said, there was a split decision in there. So it was competitive. And it's also hard when sometimes, some of the fighters that are, recognized as being on, a very elite world stage, guys like Manel Kape. And I can't explain it necessarily. And it kind of made me sweat a little bit after his post-fight interview the other week. But Manel Kape is like my favorite fighter to watch right now. And he was so gun-shy when he started off in the UFC. But I love something that is so special about Starboy's flair and what you see. And, you see that EFC and to RIZIN kind of pipeline has kind of paid dividends for them. And Kape is a guy that, and it highlights the fact that the flyweights are a really, competitive division when you get into the Asian and the Japanese markets. So, what do you think about, what you've seen from Kape so far in the UFC after, two tough and close decision losses against two really competitive opponents to start off his run in the UFC, and now it's looking like he might be knocking on the door of a title shot of a very winnable belt in the UFC.
Yeah, of course. When it comes down to what he said at the recent UFC show in Australia. I don't care what he thought was right. Nobody should ever say those particular words, especially that particular sexist slur that he said, because there are people that are actually watching who just so happen to be of the LGBTQ plus community. And I think that when it comes down to it, you wouldn't want to say that particular word to anybody on the street who just so happens to be gay or who just so happens to be lesbian, bisexual, or transgendered. So, maybe when it comes down to Cape, he should pick his words a little wiser instead of just saying what he feels.
Andrew, are you still with me? Or
When it came down to saying,
I'm here.
that particular slur, but still don't. When it came down to Manel Cape's UFC career, even I was shell-shocked at first because he came into the UFC off the back of being the RIZIN Bantamweight champion, knocking out Kai Asakura back on New Year's Eve 2019. He took him over a year to get into the octagon in the first place. And now that he's 4-2, outside of, his promos and his attitude, I think that he's doing pretty damn well to push himself up toward the flyweight contendership. I mean, what about you, Andrew?
Yeah, I think he kind of got a bum start in UFC. Because those decisions were kind of like, but that's a story for another day. About 10-8s and all that. But minus the I'm forgetting the guy that the first guy he beat, but he missed weight, so I kind of don't count that.
Yeah. You know what? When it came down to that fight, he did beat Ade Osborne via flying knee knockout, 4 minutes 44 seconds at UFC 265. But he kind of soured the move by missing weight, and then basically said in that promo. Well, actually said in his post-fight promo something to the lines of, I don't care. It's all just another win or something like that. It made him think like he didn't even care about making weight. All he just wanted to do was perform.
But I think that overall, though, I think what draws people to Manel Cape, and I think this is the thing about UFC fans, they like people who speak in broken English or who don't speak in perfect English. We saw that with Khabib. Kind of Paulo Costa kind of does it as well a little bit. Yoel Romero probably a great example. I think his personality connects the entertaining parts, not the other parts. I'll say connects with a lot of fans. He's got an exciting fighting style. He's aggressive. He's in your face. He's taunting you in the ring. The cage. Wow, he did in Rise as well in the ring as well. The way he called out Kai Car France minus what he said, but the statement itself though, that makes me hyped already for that fight. Seeing these two great flyweights happening, and can he be champion? Ooh, that's a tough one because Kai Car France is so good, and that is one of those things where like, you have to ask me the day before if they do fight, who would win. I do think Manel Cape though will eventually be a title contender at one point. Winner, the competition is tough at flyweights in UFC right now, but I'll definitely say he'll be a challenger at one point.
Of course.
You're right about the post-fight interview where he called out Kai Kara France, because it was like, it was getting me fired up at a certain point. It was like, yes, no, like very quickly. But yeah, still, I love the idea of that potential matchup. It's one that you could go back and forth in your head on, for days and still not have a clear answer. And, and this will be the last, question pertaining at all, anything close to the UFC, I assure you. But, Jiri Prochazka, RIZIN had like some interesting names that Jiri had fought. Like King Mo won a RIZIN Grand Prix back in 2015. There was the names of like CB.
Yeah, he won the first RIZIN Grand Prix off the back of beating Yuri Prohaska.
And it was a promote that Grand Prix was, you know, very representative of cool organizations around the world. It's something that I loved about that Grand Prix, is that it was really representative of different organizations. And you know, now it seems like, you know, at the bigger weight classes for RIZIN, it seems like there's been a significant fall off since that period of time, and particularly since Jiri. And now it seems like if there is any kind of hope for that, it actually could lie in this like sumo wrestler kind of prospect. And it doesn't make any sense, but they do have fan bases. And ultimately, it might be some of that homegrown talent and fan bases that could attract, you know, something a little better at those heavier weights. And you know, also the super heavyweight class has always had a home in some of the Asian markets. What do you think? And Chris, let's start with you, because I can see you have some thoughts on this. But what do you think about the future of the heavier weight classes in organizations like RIZIN?
Well, you got to think about it. In that first RIZIN Grand Prix back in 2015, remember, RIZIN started in September of 2015. They basically spent the last 3 months of that year trying to put over the first two shows, which they did effortlessly almost, aside from the Sakuraba versus Aoki fight, which made everybody cry. But still, though, when it came down to that first Grand Prix, it was only at like 215 pounds, if I'm not, it was only like 215 or 220, where it was really technically light heavyweights and heavyweights, but you still had some of the top guys above light heavyweight in the world facing off against one another. And yeah, you had King Mo beating Yuri Prohaska for his last legitimate win. But still, though, when the heavyweight division and the light heavyweight division went through Yuri through that entire run as RIZIN light heavyweight world champion, which he did run through the table, even though Mirko Kokov won the next year in that Grand Prix. I do think that when Yuri Prohaska left for the UFC, I think the interest for the heavyweight and light heavyweight division left as well, because you were supposed to have had Jake Hume fight for a future RIZIN title opportunity, but he ended up going to jail in Australia for moving bricks, so to speak, moving methamphetamine across the country. I mean, and when it came down to this particular class of light heavyweights and heavyweights in RIZIN, that was pretty much non-existent for about 2 or 3 years until the Sudario brothers came along, specifically Tsuyoshi, and just came in wrecking shop and body rocking, as we say down here in the southern states. But still, though, I think that the UFC has gained, well, I think RIZIN has gained more traction from Yuri Prohaska's success, even though Yuri only fought 3 times in the octagon so far and is destined for a 4th fight with a 2nd world title opportunity on the line. But still, though, I think when it comes down to the Sudario brothers, and one of them used one of my posts on Instagram under Focus Fights, basically saying that he didn't want to be associated with his twin brother. I think it was Taka Kenshin talking about Tsuyoshi, but the Sudario brothers are a mixed bag when it comes down to the world of MMA, especially in RIZIN, especially considering the fact that they are ex-sumo wrestlers who came into the promotion off the back of their sumo success. But you also got other guys like Hideki Shirtsukine and I think Shomashibi Sai, who are also looking to break their way in. The problem is, I think they need more foreign talent to help, compete with the RIZIN guy, with the guys that they have domestically and with some of the international guys they got.
I think when it comes to,
Andrew,
I think when
wouldn't
it
you
comes
agree?
to, yeah, some of it. I think I'll say this. I think that Yuri Prochaska is probably the best. I think maybe the best fighter to come out come onto the stage, maybe since I'll say second best, obviously Volk. I'm gonna say a post GSP era. I'm gonna say after GSP, we got Volk, and then I think Jiri Prochazka. I've never seen a man who is when fighters say that they're willing to die in the ring, it's just like words, but I think Jiri might be the only one who will do that. And then if you look at his fight with Glover Teixeira, that's one of those fights where I'm just in awe of how someone powers through such adversity and such heart, and the way he won, choking out a Glover Teixeira who just couldn't, who could. I don't think it's so much that he beat Teixeira. I think Teixeira kind of just. I think he tapped out, but he gave up. I think that's what happened. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm not. It wasn't like, oh, the submission was what won him. But I think Jiri outlived him. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. That's my little thing about Jiri. Going on to heavyweight, generally higher weight class in RIZIN. What really killed it, was the pandemic. Pandemic, you saw all those fighters, Manel Cape, Jiri, quite a few others as well, who were in RIZIN.
Ham.
Well, no, we'll see. Well, yeah, Ham went to one though, but the other ones who went to UFC, and all that, the pandemic was really what caused that. And let's be honest, that there's not, when it comes to heavyweight talent in Japan, other than Sudario, there's very little. Shibisai, maybe, yeah, but I don't think he's a guy that would be successful on the international stage. And when I say international, like you put him in a fight in Bellator against a top 15 Bellator or UFC, I don't think he wins. Sorry, truth. And then
you would basically say that he would lose 9 times out of 10, right?
Yes, yeah. And so Sudario right now, I think he has successfully put in the work of what it becomes, or what is needed to become an MMA fighter. And being the student of Ensign Inoue certainly helps that. Ensign is guiding him and helping his training. He trained at AKA in Vegas, Sudario, and the fact that he's willing to put in the work, that he's lost all the sumo weight, by the way, and he looks, every time he's been in the ring, or the cage, he has looked great. For the most part, he made some mistakes with the Shibisai fight. He made some mistakes with the Tafa fight, but he went toe to toe with Rocky Martinez and beat Rocky Martinez 3 out of 3 rounds. So and Rocky Martinez is a heavy puncher and a guy that can go for many rounds. When it comes to heavyweight, I don't know. I think that during the pandemic, RIZIN kind of also looked at who they could use as draws, who they could book. And it wasn't heavyweights. It was mainly lower weight guys like Mikuru, flyweights, bantamweights. And some of their most popular fighters right now are fighters that have come from breaking down. There's a guy named Hiroya. He's a disciple of Mikuru. And he's an 8, his record's 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10, something like that. But he's
actually 8-11-1.
Okay. But he's very popular with female fans. I went to a Deep show that he was on, and he clearly was the guy who many people in that audience, mostly women, came to see. So I don't see RIZIN actually really, they maybe heavyweight, but light heavyweight's gonna be hard because you're competing with UFC, Bellator for the time being, one PFL. And I'm sure that RIZIN can make them good offers, but listen, PFL, UFC come to you as a light heavyweight. You're gonna have more opportunities to fight, bigger international stage to be seen. I don't see RIZIN really seeing the need to go to look for light heavyweight, middleweight, even welterweight fighters at this point. Heavyweight's a little bit different because you can still have freak show aspect to it. And you can have, it can be what it is. I think though
You can
they are going to lose
basically
Cesaro.
say, you can
Well,
basically
hold on,
say,
just finish my last thought. Let me finish my last thought. I do think
okay,
though that Sudario is eventually going to go to UFC. I think he's going to eventually run out of opponents to beat and RIZIN. And I think he could be the first successful sumo guy to turn into MMA and have a successful career in UFC.
But still, though, what we can pretty much conclude with is that, after you reach 155 pounds in RIZIN, it's pretty much a wasteland of just nothing. When it comes down to fights above 155 pounds, the opportunity to fight in RIZIN is pretty much rare. I mean, that's when you got a guy like Igor Fat Ninja Tanabe, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu god-like fighter, Fat Ninja, who was pretty much, just ripping away at people, submitting people left, right, and center. I mean, it won't be before long before people start slapping that he should go to UFC tag on him. But still, though, I think where RIZIN has missed a lot since the pandemic is foreign fighters above 70 kilos or 155 pounds that would definitely want to fight in that promotion. And I think all they just need is a shot up the rear, so to speak, just to get that going.
I also just want to bring up one quick point. Sorry, Mr. Brady, but the other thing now is that RIZIN is now marketing more so in Japan than outside Japan. And Pride's whole thing was the freak show fighter, like a Bob Sapp type, or someone that they could put on variety shows, and people would be like, "Look at this monster! Look at this crazy guy."
Someone who has commercial appeal.
Yeah, now it's they want mainly Japanese fighters that they could put on for shows in Japan that appeal to the Japanese audience, and that's who the Japanese audience is gearing towards now. It's not the Bob Sapp types anymore. It is the Mikuru Asakura types. Sorry, that's my last point, sir.
And sometimes I do pine for the days of Bob Sapp versus Jose Canseco or Butterbean versus Giant.
Nah, that was Hongman Choi versus Jose Canseco, but I get what you mean there.
The general concept, Chris. That fight was made in spirit somewhere. But as far as Tanabe, I've got him by first round submission this weekend. And as far as that homegrown talent that you're talking about, I think that something that RIZIN is kind of starting to do that I like that Bellator did is get people from, some of their professional debuts onward who have had successful amateur careers in other combats, like high level wrestling. And something about Jiri to put y'all in a time warp. His last 3 fights, Glover Teixeira, Dominic Reyes, and Volkan, which was obviously a crazy fight in his UFC debut. The 3 fights before that, CB Dalloway, Fabio Maldonado, and King Mo. What a period of a few years. And it's crazy the kind of names that a guy like Jiri was able to rack up and RIZIN over a short period of time. Guys like Satoshi Ishii, Vadim Nemkov, Carl Albrecht, Bruno Capoloza, Jake Hune, who is a very unique creature in and of himself. But so here's one thing, and because we're at the 40-minute mark, let's go into a bit more of a lightning round format, guys. Who currently is your favorite champion in RIZIN, and why is that? We'll start with you, Chris.
My favorite current champion in RIZIN, I can't really say it's Juan Archuleta because, I don't know, why pick against the American, right? Because he's kind of boring to me. But I do think that my favorite champion right now is Seiki Izawa, the women's super atomweight world champ, because let's face it, she is dominant for only being in the sport for about 3 years. Andrew, what about you?
My case, well, I would have said Clever, but he unfortunately is no longer champion anymore due to his own decisions. So, and I would probably have to say, I'm going to say Satoshi Soza, because I've never seen a guy use jiu-jitsu so effectively as well as he does in MMA matches.
I do have to kind of lean toward Azawa. I love the potential of strike, and it, especially Michelle Watterson getting the hell beat out of her, this past weekend. It makes me frustrated that Adam Waite does not have more of a platform on the worldwide scale.
No, that's good. I hope they don't, because then if that happens, then you RIZIN will lose all their super atom weights. I don't want it. I don't want you guys. It'd be great. I know what you're saying, but I don't want it to happen, because there'll be no more atom weights in RIZIN anymore.
I got you. That makes sense. Uh, so next, what do you think is the biggest sleeper weight class in RIZIN right now that you think has actually the potential to send off a few more, guys that could throw their hat in the ring for, a potential world championship in one of the world's top promotions?
Featherweight, especially considering the fact that now you got Fugar Karamov as the champion, and he's pretty much one of the top guys to come out of Eastern Europe. And he basically dominated Kleber Koike Herbst in his title opportunity, because let's face it, he basically left Kleber Koike Herbst a broken shell of a man. Well, actually, no. Let me rephrase that. Fugar Karamov did not beat Kleber Koike. It's just the fact that Kleber Koike lost his belt on the scale because he missed weight. But yeah, I can basically say without a shadow of a doubt, featherweight is the next fight class, the next weight class for popularity, especially to get somebody into the UFC. And oh, by the way, Karamov beat Mikuru Asakura soundly, beat Yoshinori Horie soundly, beat Taichi Nakajima soundly to become the to become the RIZIN featherweight champion. And I think that he might end up being that next big star to help boost RIZIN into making the featherweight division worthwhile. What say you, Andrew?
Definitely featherweight. I definitely have to agree. If you look at the talent, I mean, the biggest draw in their promotion, Mikuru, is featherweight. They're doing a show in Azerbaijan, which is because they have a featherweight champion who is from Azerbaijan now. And if you look at the other talent that's in featherweight, Kleber Koike, maybe second best jiu-jitsu guy to transition to MMA, and because he's dominated almost everybody in RIZIN and finished them. Chihiro Suzuki knocked out one of the Pitbull brothers in an incredible underdog match that you would think that Pitbull would have run right through him, but no, Chihiro Suzuki knocked him out cold. And there's a whole bunch of other talents as well. Horie, I was gonna say Horie, but he's no longer in that division anymore. But Yutaka Saito, I hate to say his name, but I can't deny that he's won his last fight. Juntaro Ushiku, Kyoei Hagiwara, who's an interesting character, because he became so successful during the pandemic era, and he was a under 500 fighter that somehow became popular due to his attitude and his brawling style of fighting. And he still has an under 500 record, yet he still remains popular with the crowd. He brings people from Osaka that will come see his shows in Tokyo. So, in short answer, featherweight, absolutely sleeper division.
Yeah, I wish there was more to say on that one, but for the criteria of that, I think you guys hit the nail on the head, I think is the phrase. I think that the only thing else to say on that point is just as light as you can go, because as far as, the bantamweights that are able to drop down to 125, at every period of flyweight, and even through, Demetrius Johnson's run at the top, we've been so critical and had a microscope on the flyweight division at the top of the world. And we're constantly watching it evolve. And, with Davison Figueiredo, we were looking at that guy and saying, oh, that guy is going to be the champion for a long time at flyweight, and he's going to bring excitement. And now, it's been, even better somewhat in the aftermath. And there's parity, there's growing excitement. And I think there's some growing recognition at some of those guys. So, just a devil's advocate answer would be as light as you can possibly go, because it's thinner at the top. But so here's the next one is, aside from champions, who's a prospect in RIZIN right now that you identify as someone that has the potential to be special?
Andrew, you want to take this one first?
Oh boy, it's so funny because I'm actually writing an article for MMA Sucker on top 10 Japanese prospects, 5 women, 5 men, and I'm still trying to consider my own criteria of what a prospect is because I feel like for different people, it's a different answer of what they count to a prospect. But let's see, in RIZIN, a prospect who I think people should look forward, who can make it as a champion. That's a tough one. If we could, there are so many people who I want to say, but I'm trying to mentally argue with myself if they would count as a prospect. I'm trying to go by mainly a record, mainly. Damn, this is a tough one.
It's hard, I know. Just pick one.
That, you can count some people from Pancrase too, if that makes it easier.
Okay.
You know what?
Okay.
I'll go ahead and say mine just so that Andrew can think for a bit. I think mine would have to be Sora Yamamoto, especially considering the fact that he is a second-generation competitor. He is a second-generation competitor. His father was one of the original Shudo world champions back in the late 80s and early 90s. Yeah, he may have lost his last 3 straight, but he has that wrestling pedigree that would make you realize that he can also, be a top competitor. Another one I would say is Shinobu Ota, the 2016 Olympic Greco-Roman wrestling silver medalist. I think that considering the fact that he has heavy hands, considering the fact that he is, dare I say, a badass, when it comes down to handling his business, he doesn't hit you with grappling. He hits you with fist and he hits you with stumps. I think that, Shinobu Ota just might be a major player in the bantamweight or featherweight division should he choose to move up.
Okay. Okay. So since you helped narrow it down, Mr. Brady, I'm going to say Makoto Shinryu. Not only is he a CFFC champion, but I think he would have put up a good fight against Kyoji Horiguchi had it not ended in 22nd eye poke. I think he could potentially he called out John Dodson. I hope that fight happens. I think if he were to go to UFC, I think he could be a top guy there, top 5 champion. Ooh, that's tough, especially with when you got Brandon Moreno, Pantoja as all those guys in that division. But I definitely think he could put up a good fight against Kyoji Horiguchi if they ever have that rematch again. And I think he could definitely be top 5 in UFC.
And I love, because I was waiting for somebody to say Makoto Shinryu. And that's a guy who went into Cage Fury, took a belt on an interim basis, and then hopped back to, where he's at, and has fought in a handful of high-level promotions that have solid reputations. And, I think that especially when you get into the Pancrase area and you get into RIZIN and guys that, don't necessarily exclusively fight with one organization, there's a lot of guys in that age 27 to age 32 range that, if they ever decide to take an opportunity outside of that continent, you wonder, what they could be capable of, and at least be, of a moderate competitive level. But I'll ask you both, because I'm, eyeballing Tapology's prospect list right now, just trying to feed some ideas through my head. What do you think about, even though with the disappointing professional debut, what do you think about the future for Ryo Yamaguchi?
Andrew, you want to go ahead and say that?
Sorry, what was the name again?
Ryu Yamaguchi.
Ryu Yamaguchi. Who did he fight again? Just remind me.
So it was Hitoka Ando. He lost by split decision at Pancrase 337, and this was just this past week.
Okay. Okay, so transparency. I don't watch Pancrase anymore because their shows are geo-blocked here. I'm not going to have. I don't think I can have the best answer. If you let me quickly look up this gentleman, I can maybe have a better Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Oh, I know. Okay, I know. I seen this guy before. Okay. I even okay. That's where I recognize the name. It was. Um. Well, here's the thing. As a IMMAF guy, he definitely has a head start on the competition. Um. I don't think it's very hard. You see, here's the funny thing is that here's actually a greater thing to bring up is that even if you lose your first fight in Japan, that's not the end of your career. You if you look at a lot of people who start in America or in the West in MMA, they lose their first fight, and then you never hear them ever again. In Japan, though, that's not. There have been fighters who have lost their first 5 fights, like in a row, and then they go on to have a successful MMA career after that. Split decision loss. I can't tell you how the fight went because I didn't watch the show. Listen, it's not gonna stop him. He'll be back. Maybe he'll win his next one, maybe not. But that's the great thing about Japan is that it doesn't it's not you will not it will not unless you fight horribly and you're boring and you're terrible, you will come back. You will get another chance. And I have no doubt that Pancos would give Yamaguchi another chance.
You see that happen in the Asian MMA promotions a lot because like 50% of the guys that you're fighting are going to be extremely well-rounded, and then 50% of the guys are going to be extreme specialists. And so, on any given night, you could have like whatever your struggles are. But here's what we can kind of end off on. And, Vugar Karamov, just to note, everybody, he is fighting out of Baku, Azerbaijan. I love to see unique markets enter the higher level of MMA promotions. And the more countries represented with belts in the top 5 or 6 promotions, I think the better. It's in Minalke, for instance, coming from Angola, that the African market has kind of funneled well into that RIZIN field. But, for what we started off talking about, what do you guys see as the future of RIZIN in the next 5 years? What do you see? Where do you see this organization headed? What do you see the possibilities are, between RIZIN and ONE over the Andrew, I can see from your eyes that the possibilities are swarming. Chris, we'll start with you. We got to give Andrew some time to stew on this.
Well, you know what? First of all, when it comes down to Ryo Yamaguchi, I think even though he lost his debut fight in Pancrase, and yeah, he did lose also to Mohammed the Machine Mokaev in the amateur ranks for the IMMAF, I do think his future is bright as far as prospects go. I mean, it's only just one split decision loss. He can turn that into something remarkable if he has a lot of focus on his career. Plus, he kind of looks like me, and I wish for the brother to do well. But still, though, when it comes down to RIZIN in the next 5 years, considering the fact that they are now 8 years into their history already, I mean, I just hope that they don't end up being like another Pride FC, because when it comes down to it, yeah, they had all this great talent. They had all these great prospects. They had all this excitement going on about them, to the point where they were at one point in time the #1 MMA promotion in the world, Pride FC, of course. And then they went and got bought out by Dana White and his cronies, and had 2 events in Vegas that underwhelmed for a lot of fight fans because of the amount of restrictions that they had. But the one thing I do hope when it comes down to RIZIN in the next 5 years is that they don't end up like Pride or like Dream or like Sengoku, and just be a part of past JMMA promotions that had the ball but dropped it, so to speak. I want RIZIN to succeed as much as they can no matter what they do, but I just don't want them to be another collection, to be a part of a big collection of past JMMA memories that didn't turn out so well. Andrew, what say you?
Oh, I promised I would never answer another question about like where do you see yourself in 10 years type ever since the pandemic happened, because my answer would always be like, well, I hope that there's not another world stopping pandemic that interrupts our
come to think of it, dude, we all aged a hell of a lot during that pandemic. It was mind numbing to say the least. But go ahead.
It's your show, Mr. Brady. That's not an interesting answer, so I'm going to give you an actual answer. I mean, in 5 years, I think RIZIN will still be around. I think they'll definitely run a show in the U.S., probably Hawaii by then. What I'm hoping is that, and again, this is going back to what we were having a discussion in Discord about how it seemed like RIZIN at one point had a lot more international eyes on them than they do now, despite running more shows, despite having more English outreach. What I hope is that that they do get these. When you talk about Angola, I think that's one of the things that's most interesting about when RIZIN first started. That you get fires from like Hungary, you get fires from Poland, you get fires from Angola, just from Guam, and all and. You got fighters not just with Japanese flags next to their names.
Obviously, you had fighters from Egypt and
Lithuania.
You had fighters from South Africa,
Lithuania as well, and Senegal. And hopefully they can go back to that as well. Right now, I think they're. I know this is going to sound so petty, but I hope that they can change within the next 5 years. I hope they change it for their next show, but I know they're not going to, is getting rid of the awful Zoom commentary, because that is absolutely pitiful at this point, that the second biggest promotion in the world by ticket when it comes to ticket sales and drawing power is using Zoom commentary for English.
And it's funny enough that you say that, Andrew, because they used studio commentary when they started out. And then during the pandemic, they switched to Zoom commentary. Well, before the pandemic, they switched to remote commentary with Matt Stryker, and then Zoom commentary when they got their English.
It was studio. It was studio, and then they brought people in live. They were bringing people in live. Then they went to the telephone thing with Matt Stryker. Anyway, but like what I hope that they do. What I hope that they do as a promotion is that I do hope that they do scout more talent. I think it looks like Azerbaijan's going to be their country. UFC has Dagestan, Bellator has Russia. Listen, let the other Eastern Bloc countries get the love from RIZIN. I hope that they find talent in those areas. I hope that they do make belts in flyweight, and that we do get. We get championship matchups more often. I feel like there's only like 1 or 2 a year. I would like to see more. And also, Bellator doesn't vaporize into thin air. Listen, yearly Bellator versus RIZIN show. I hope that sticks around if Bellator is around in 5 years. If not, though, that would be a very disappointing thing, because it is something that's I like to joke and trash on Bellator. The thing you said about the marketing thing is so true. I never know the Bellator show until literally the week of. And I can say that the one show that I always know, that I always put on my calendar, is the Bellator versus RIZIN show. I hope that's around as well within in 5 years. And, hopefully they just they grow bigger and bigger, and they just get more people watching them and internationally. I hope they sustain the success that they have that they have in Japan.
And you know what? I'll go ahead and add one more thing. They need to stop relying on folks like Floyd Mayweather to help them, because he's only there for his bottom line and his people. I mean, yeah, it would be cool to have somebody like Ramblin' Velez be the ring announcer for when they get to these U.S. shows, because he's a cool dude, even though he was misunderstood for that RIZIN 14 show when Mayweather knocked out Tenshin Nasukawa. I think that to have more English language outlets, and obviously they're going to go to Azerbaijan on the day before my 31st birthday, and they're going to have a show that's strictly either in Japanese, English, or Azerbaijani. I think it's going to probably be a mixture of all three, but I think that more English language and international outreach would probably definitely suit them for the better, especially if they want to continue to survive through the years ahead.
And so I'll give a little bit of my input on this part, and then I want to turn it back to you guys for final comments, as you are the guests on this show, and I love the work that you guys do on We Are RIZIN. So I think that, in terms of Asian MMA promotions, it's kind of like the Michael Scott Paper Company. If I shut down today, I'll come back tomorrow under a different name. I have no shortage of names. And, I do a lot of alternative football stuff too. And, with the USFL and XFL merger that's currently going down, you don't
Mm-hmm.
Bellator PFL, maybe that makes a little bit of sense. And we've seen, a lot of purchases throughout the years that, whatever, we lost the flavor of the WEC, we lost what Strikeforce.
Mm-hmm.
You hope that these things aren't inevitable and necessary evils. I really hope so. And so, my hope for RIZIN over, the next 5 years is I hope that the part of MMA that has Josh Barnett doing a pro wrestling bout with Satoshi Ishii slapping each other in the face on New Year's Eve, I hope that part never goes away. I hope the Shinya Aoki's versus the Fedor stuff. I hope that there's always at least a pocket of that in mixed martial arts. But ultimately, what I want to see developing is the talent from Africa, not necessarily the countries that are the most represented at the time. Because as we know, different athletes from different countries in Africa excel at very different things. And I think right now, if you're talking about slept on markets for mixed martial arts at a weight class that has a future, look no further than India and Bangladesh, where I think fighters could make a much lower weight. They have a ton of people there with very unique athletic backgrounds. And so this is a big world out there. And this sport is only 30 years old. And there's a reason that the original, big MMA or the original MMA promotions that started off in Asia in the late 80s and the early 90s, there's a reason that was closer to the mixed martial arts that we know today than UFC 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 were. So
exactly.
It has a strong core. I always want to see, major MMA in Asia, and I think that it'll never go away. The question is, can that talent be developed, and who's going to be the first to get it?
Exactly. And you know what? As somebody who watches a lot of spring football, I can tell you that I hope that the USFL XFL merger works out for the players and for the fans a little bit better than, say, let's see, the UFC WEC or UFC Strikeforce mergers did for mixed martial arts. But as far as slept on markets, you can basically look toward Africa and say that entire continent is a slept on market. But still, though, I get exactly what you're saying, Brady. The Middle Eastern and African markets need to be looked at more, especially when it comes down to Japanese MMA, because especially given Manel Cape, y'all can definitely make something out of nothing when it comes down to cultivating African talent, especially in Japan.
Oh yeah, no, I absolutely agree. With everything you said, Brady and Chris. It's kind of funny though that PFL kind of has seemingly taken that mantle of finding those fighters from just those types of countries when it was RIZIN doing it many years ago. I think also what's got to be said is not only is it great that RIZIN is around, but also you brought up Pancras, and listen, I would watch Pancras, but I've got no time for VPNs and all that. So I keep up with the results, but I don't regularly watch it. But I shout out's gotta go a promotion like Deep, which credit to Shigeru Sakai, who has found Sayaki, excuse me, who has found he just manages to find these fighters for women when it comes to deep duels, and for men deep, and he's been able to cultivate talent, developing talent through amateur fights, through showcasing them on small shows that are in Nagoya, Hamamatsu, and different venues in Kirk and in Tokyo, but yet that's where Shinryu started. He started out in deep, and eventually became the deep flyweight champion. And I think that's also got to be said for the current strength of Japanese MMA now, particularly, is a promotion like Deep, which is continuously, when these talents move on from them, they immediately go to somebody else. They don't stop and wonder what are we going to do, what are we going to do. They go on and they find the next person to take up that mantle of who can be their top star, draw, ace, however you want to do it. And in fairness, RIZIN was also did it as well. with what they could during the pandemic and when they lost all those fighters to UFC and Bellator and won. So listen, if they do, if that was to go away, man, I think that MMA would be a lot less interesting, because if that means Bellator is gone, if RIZIN's gone, if Deep is gone, Pancrase is gone. Listen, listen. I love my one kickboxing matches, but listen, can I sustain myself on that? No, not so much. I can't sustain myself on the always changing rules depending on how Chachi's feeling up when he wakes up that day. One championship, and I can appreciate UFC as the market leader. I don't like a lot of things they do, but I do. They are needed in the ecosystem, and PFL is doing their $1 million thing, so happy to see fighters get paid for that. But yeah, I definitely feel that if RIZIN and a lot of these Japanese promotions were not around, boy, these Japanese fighters would have nothing. Where there would be no avenue to see them on any stage, let alone a small one or a big one.
And you love the stuff, the products that Deep Jewels is putting out there, and the thing that you said too that resonates is it's hard to be a football fan without knowing what's going on in the NFL. I just hate the idea that is, I hate the potential that is how I might be thinking about the UFC very soon. And maybe it's what it's like now, and I'm just refusing to let myself think of it like that because it's not very fun. But guys, we've had a phenomenal conversation about MMA and RIZIN specifically. This is exactly what I wanted for us to be talking about for a little bit over an hour. Thank you so much to both Andrew Benjamin and Chris Gary for coming on Tap That today. Guys, it's been a pleasure having you. If there's anything that either you want to shout out, anything you're doing on any other platforms, the floor is yours.
Okay, Andrew, you go first.
Follow the We Are RIZIN podcast Twitter at We Are RIZIN Pod. I do stuff for MMA Sucker as well. No, that's basically it. That's basically what I focus on when it comes to combat sports.
Understood. And I mean, you can follow Andrew on Twitter at abenja1. You can follow him on Instagram, I think at Andrew Benjamin, right?
No, it's abenja1.
Oh, right. Same thing, Twitter and Instagram. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ChrisGary92 and at ChristianGary1992 for the latter of the platforms. And when it comes down to me not only doing work on the We Are RIZIN podcast, I also work on a small project called Focus Fights. I do work on the Focus Fights audio podcast. And I basically would run through all these plugs, but since I don't feel like it, because there ain't no damn way my voice can hold up, I mean, all I can just say is go to the Linktree page, and I'll spell it out for you. linktr.ee/Focus Fights, where you'll see all the platforms that Focus Fights is a part of. Did you get all that?
Folks, go follow them at all those places. I know I did. You can follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. That's where I make picks for Bellator, PFL 1, RIZIN, Invicta, all the major feeder promotions, big boxing events. You can follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast. That's the Facebook page, Spotify, and the YouTube channel. Thank you so much to my guests from the We Are RIZIN podcast. Check out all of the great work that they're doing. Have yourselves a great week on this UFC hiatus, and peace.